Is this the dumbest bank heist ever? It started like any other day in a bank in Sandy Springs, Georgia. People paying bills, cashing checks, and going about their business. Then in walked a 22-year-old woman with a plan so bizarre, so spectacularly doomed, you almost want to applaud the creativity. No mask, no weapon, just pure misplaced confidence. And a note, that's right, on January 24th, 2008, Channel Monae Gaskin, a 22-year-old who clearly thought life was a Netflix drama, decided to pull off a bank robbery with nothing but a stick-up note scribbled on a piece of paper. Now you might be thinking, okay, maybe it's so crazy it just might work. Spoiler alert, it didn't. Because instead of making off with a bag of clean, spendable cash, she ended up with money that came with a surprise gift. A die pack, the kind that explodes like a crime scene piñata and paints everything inside a nice shade of orange. And if that wasn't bad enough, her master getaway plan? Not a car or a motorcycle, not even a stolen bicycle. No, she decided to run to the bus stop. This is a ridiculous and darkly hilarious story of how one woman tried to rob a bank and got sabotaged by a die pack, then waited for public transportation like she was just coming home from a shift at Starbucks. Before we dive into the disaster that unfolded, let's rewind a little. Channel Monae Gaskin wasn't some hardened career criminal. She wasn't on the FBI's most wanted list. She wasn't even very good at planning crimes. What she was a 22-year-old woman living in Georgia, desperate and clearly under the impression that robbing a bank would be as easy as grabbing coffee. Neighbors described her as quiet. Friends said she had a streak of impulsiveness. Social media, well, was the usual selfies with vague captions. Maybe a quote about chasing dreams. Nothing that screamed future bank robber. But here's the thing about people like Channel. Desperation can make you do wild things. Rent's due and bills are piling up. Maybe she felt cornered, and instead of, picking up an extra shift or applying for a payday loan, she thought, I'll just rob a bank. Now, let's be fair. Movies have been lying to us about bank robberies for decades. They make it look so smooth, like you run into the bank and wave a note, and the teller hands over stacks of unmarked bills. Suddenly you're on a beach in Mexico sipping margaritas. But in real life, it's not Ocean's 11. It's more like America's Dumbest Criminals. Unfortunately for Channel, she was about to star in her very own episode. Here, we got Channel Monae Gaskin glowing in orange dye at the bus stop. When the first police cruiser rolled up, the officers didn't even need a description. The dispatcher barely finished saying, "Female suspect covered in orange dye," before one officer spotted her sitting on the bench like a kindergarten student who just lost her juice box. There she was, drenched in orange, clutching a ruined bag of bills, as though denial alone could restore their value. One officer, suppressing a smirk, muttered to his partner, "Well, that was easy." They approached cautiously because protocol demanded it. But even a rookie could tell this wasn't going to be a shootout. Channel wasn't running or hiding. She was waiting for the bus home. "Ma'am," the officer said, "stand up slowly." Channel hesitated. Maybe thinking she could still bluff her way out. Maybe she believed she could convince them she'd just come from some extremely messy arts and craft session. But the problem was she reeked of bank security ink, a pungent chemical smell that clung to everything. Within minutes, she was in handcuffs. The orange dye staining not just her clothes, but now the backseat of the patrol car as they drove her away. The officers exchanged the kind of looks that said, "We'll be laughing about this at the precinct for weeks." At the station, Channel faced the reality of her grand plan unraveling. Mug shots are rarely flattering, but hers carried an extra touch of color. Hair frazzled, eyes defiant, and cheeks still speckled with unforgiving orange stains. During questioning, detectives asked her the obvious. Why rob a bank, and why on earth did she think she could get away using public transportation? Police say she confidently told them she had pulled it off before. In fact, she admitted to robbing a bank in DeKalb County just weeks earlier on January 15th, and escaping the same way, by hopping on the bus. For that earlier robbery, Authorities said she'll likely be handed over to DeKalb County to face charges too. Channel's approach seemed less like a robbery and more like a prank. One detective joked saying she didn't rob a bank, she robbed us of any suspense. When the case went to court, the spectacle continued as local reporters packed into the benches eager for the kind of headline that practically writes itself. Georgia robbery suspect arrested while waiting for the bus. Prosecutors presented the facts with the confidence of someone holding back a chuckle. Security footage showed her handing over the note. The dye bomb explosion had left physical evidence all over her clothes. Witnesses from the bus stop testified. Her defense attorney, on the other hand, had the unenviable job of making this sound less ridiculous. They argued that it was caused by financial desperation, hardship, and poor judgment. All valid points, but none could erase the fact that she'd done this before, and if not for the dye, she would have disappeared. Or was this one a trap, and she walked right into it? At one point, when the prosecutor displayed the mugshots of Channel covered in orange dye, the courtroom reportedly erupted in muffled laughter. Even the judge struggled to maintain composure. In the end, the verdict was inevitable: guilty. News outlets feasted on the story. It wasn't just crime, it was comedy. Clips of the incident aired with titles like "The Bus Stop Bandit," "Caught Red-Handed Literally," "Where's the Getaway Car?" Social media went into overdrive. Memes spread and creators reenacted the robbery with dye packs replaced by exploding ketchup packets. Yet, beneath the comedy, the story raised bigger questions. Why would a 22-year-old with her entire adult life ahead of her believe a note, a bag, and a bus stop could lead to riches? Was it desperation, naivete, or simply a belief that she could somehow beat a system designed to make robbing a bank nearly impossible in the 21st century? Banks, after all, have cameras in every corner, silent alarms, dye packs, tracking devices. You name it, a robbery isn't a chess match anymore. It's a guaranteed checkmate for law enforcement. But Channel Monae Gaskin either didn't know or didn't care. She walked in with a fantasy and walked out a punchline. Let's peel back the layers of her life in order to understand her motivation. Every true crime story has two halves, the act itself and the person behind it. With Channel, it's easy to focus on the absurd image of a dye-stained woman sitting at a bus stop. Behind that moment is a 22-year-old whose life didn't begin in bank robberies. It began in struggle. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Channel grew up in a city where wealth and poverty coexist on the same block. High-rise condos loom over neighborhoods where every dollar stretched is a survival tactic. Her family wasn't wealthy. They were working class, patching life together paycheck by paycheck. Neighbors recall her as a quiet girl, not particularly rebellious. Not the kind of child you'd expect to one day headline the news. But she had one common trait: she wanted more. More than what her environment offered, and more than the relentless grind her mother and father endured. As adulthood came crashing in with rent bills, the weight of wanting more turned into desperation. Channel's family situation wasn't unusual, but it was difficult. Her mother worked long shifts, her father wasn't consistently in the picture, and money was a constant source of stress. By 22, Channel was juggling low-paying jobs, retail, food service, and temp gigs. Each paycheck disappeared almost as soon as it arrived, from groceries to transportation. Her life was an endless cycle of catching up, but never pulling through. To friends, she sometimes joked about hitting a lick, a slang for making illegal money fast. They'd laugh, brushing it off as empty talk, but those words revealed a mindset brewing under the surface. When you feel trapped in poverty, often a shortcut looks less like a risk and more like salvation. So why rob a bank? That's the question everyone asked. With armored guards, cameras, alarms, and decades of criminal deterrence, robbing a bank isn't the best idea. But in Channel's mind, a bank symbolized the very thing she lacked: security, wealth, and access. She didn't have a master plan. She didn't spend weeks studying blueprints. Or movies like Heat or Inside Man movies showing real-life bank heists. For her, it was raw impulse. A simple equation. Bank equals money, and money equals freedom. That clarity blinded her to everything else. The idea likely grew in moments of quiet frustration, staring at an empty bank account, counting crumpled bills in her wallet, or listening to her mother stress about overdue payments. One day the thought hardened. What if I just walked into a bank and asked for the money? And unlike most people who quickly dismiss that thought, Channel actually acted on it. Not once, but twice. Her family was stunned by the arrest. For them, Channel wasn't a hardened criminal. She was a daughter and sister. A young woman who made questionable choices in the past, but never like this. Her mother, in particular, struggled with the shame. In interviews, she avoided the reporters, and neighbors said she was heartbroken, not just over crime itself, but over how publicly embarrassing it had become. Friends described Channel as funny, outgoing, and occasionally reckless. She had a habit of posting dramatic quotes online, little fragments of defiance and frustration that in hindsight hinted at deeper dissatisfaction. Things like, "I'm tired of being broke. One day it's going to be my turn." At the time, they seemed like harmless venting, but in retrospect, they were signals of a storm brewing inside her. When people look at Channel's failed robbery, they see stupidity, but psychologists see something else. Desperation mixed with magical thinking. Magical thinking is a belief that you can bypass reality with a shortcut, that somehow your plan, no matter how flawed, will succeed because you need it to. It's the mindset of gamblers and con artists. In this case, this 22-year-old thought a banknote and a bus stop could rewrite her life. For Channel, robbing the bank wasn't just about the money. It was about proving she could escape the invisible ceiling pressing down on her. But the ceiling didn't break. It collapsed on her. Publicly, she became a meme, a punchline, the bus stop bandit. But privately, in the weeks after her arrest, letters from family members painted a picture of someone who was more naive than malicious. She wasn't part of a gang, nor did she own weapons. She wasn't even particularly criminal-minded. She was just a young woman who believed in the fantasy of fast money. Her lawyer, trying to humanize her in court, emphasized that this was not the act of a seasoned criminal. It wasn't the act of a criminal mastermind. It was the act of someone young, desperate, and out of options. The jury didn't need convincing. They could see it for themselves. The absurdity of her crime made it impossible to paint her as a hardened villain. What they saw was a woman who detonated her own life with one spectacularly bad decision. Except it wasn't the first time. Channel Monae Gaskin had already done this before. She walked into a bank with nothing but a note. No gun, no mask, no plan, and somehow managed to walk away with the cash without getting arrested. It should have been enough. A wake-up call, a warning. But desperation can make one greedy, and once you taste the ease of a shortcut, it's hard not to believe you can do it again. So when the bills stacked higher, when the bank account ran dry and life pressed down harder than ever, the thought returned. What if I just try again? She told herself it would be simple. Slide the note, smile if she had to, and walk away with the cash and blend quickly into the crowd. On the morning of the robbery, she wasn't poring over maps or scheming with accomplices. She woke up in her small apartment, scrolling through her phone. To everyone else, it was just another Thursday, but to her it was round two. The first time she got away with it, and she believed she would the second time. But desperation rarely grants the same mercy twice. Her pulse raced, but she convinced herself it would work. If she was going to do this, she had to look the part. To her, image was power, so she didn't wear a hoodie or a disguise. Instead, she put on an outfit that made her feel bold. Eyelashes on point, hair and nails freshly done. She believed that if she looked unbothered, maybe she could achieve her goal. Ironically, her fashion choices, the very thing that made her feel confident, would later make her unforgettable to witnesses. Channel didn't have a car that morning, so she walked. She walked past it all, blending in like any other woman about their business. No one knew that in her purse was a small folded piece of paper that would change her life. The bank doors slid open and Channel stepped inside, and for a brief second, she almost looked like any other customer. It was a normal day in the bank with people cashing checks and depositing pay slips. She walked up the counter with calmly and slid the teller the note. She wasn't dressed like a robber. No ski mask, no hoodie pulled tight, no oversized sunglasses. Nope, she looked like she was there to run an errand, except she wasn't. Now, let's pause here. If you were the teller, you might think she's depositing a check. Maybe she wants to withdraw $20. But no, this was no normal slip. It was a stick-up note. And on that note, in a hurried, messy handwriting were the magic words, "Give me the money." Now, bank tellers are trained for this. They know not to argue or play the hero. So the teller, probably with a poker face that deserves an Oscar, did exactly what Channel said and starts packing the cash. But here's the thing, banks aren't stupid, and this isn't the Wild West. They've got technology. They've got hidden buttons and surveillance cameras rolling. And most importantly, they've got die packs. For those who don't know this, a die pack is basically the bank's way of saying, go ahead and take the money. We're about to ruin your life. It's a small device usually slipped in between the bills that explodes once the thief walks a certain distance away. Orange smoke ink everywhere, money, hands, and clothes stained. And the thief, instantly recognizable. That's exactly what the teller did. She loaded the cash into a bag with a die pack neatly tucked inside. Channel, none the wiser, grabbed the bag and made for the exit like she just made a withdrawal. I bet in her head she was already daydreaming how rich she'd become. She'd beaten the system. Again, Channel is walking briskly, trying to look casual and not make eye contact with anyone. According to police, after being handed the bag of cash, she bolted across the parking lot and ducked into a nearby restaurant. But before she could catch her breath, the bag burst, sending a cloud of orange dye over her and the stolen money. Her bag? Ruined. Her clothes? Splattered. Her hands? Marked. It looked like she'd lost a paintball match, and less like a clean getaway. Investigators say she quickly abandoned the restaurant and tried to hide the evidence. She slipped into a grocery store, where she stashed the ink-stained clothes and cash in the bathroom. Then, after changing into fresh clothes, she made her way to a bus stop behind the store. And this is where things go from bad to straight up laughable. Because what was her escape plan? A getaway driver? Nope. A stolen car waiting nearby? Nope. A quick sprint into some alley? Nope. She walked to the bus stop. Yes, the bus stop. Because nothing screams master criminal like waiting for public transportation. Your clothes covered in orange dye, holding a bag that looks like it just survived a horror movie. People waiting at the bus stop are staring like, ma'am, are you good? Now let's talk logistics. A bus stop is the exact opposite of what you want after a bank robbery. Buses are slow and they make multiple stops. They have cameras too, and worst of all, you have to wait for them. There's nothing fast about a bus getaway. But Channel was apparently betting on MARTA Bus Transit to be her getaway ride. That's where officers caught up with her. And just like that, Channel Monae Gaskin's short-lived career as a bank robber was officially over. Because thanks to the die pack, they didn't even have to look hard. It's not every day you find someone at a bus stop covered in orange smoke residue, clutching a bag of ruined cash. Here's the thing. This wasn't her first time, as she said, when asked how she'd planned to get away on the bus. Channel had pulled it off before with no die pack or witnesses, and she walked away clean. And maybe, just maybe, that success was her downfall. When she stepped into that bank again, she thought she could repeat the same play with just a note and confidence. Grab the cash and walk away. Only this time, it felt different. The teller stayed too calm. The packaged cash came too quickly, as if they had been waiting for her. And maybe they were. Channel must have known that this wasn't just bad luck the moment that bag exploded in a cloud of bright dye. It was a trap. The bank had learned from her first heist, and they were ready and waiting. Soon the story hit the news, and Channel Monae Gaskin became known as the Bus Stop Bandit. The nickname stuck not because of her criminal genius, but because of the absurdity. A young woman who robbed a bank with a note and then waited for the bus, clothed in orange with money she could never spend. It was the worst possible outcome for Channel. She wanted to flip her life overnight. Instead, she was ridiculed, mocked, and plastered on TV screens as a joke. It's a lesson on desperation, pride, and the belief that you can outsmart the system. You can pick the bank. You can even pick the getaway, but you don't get to pick the ending. Channel's ending? It was written long before she stepped into that bank, and long before the die pack exploded. The moment she tried to do it twice. The game was over. The bus stop bandit wasn't caught by chance. She was caught by her greed. Thanks for watching. If you want more true crime stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. After all, the real mystery isn't always the crime. It's how they ever thought they could get away with it.